It was late at night, the kind of night that feels heavy, as if the world itself is weighed down with secrets. The city outside was alive with sounds, the distant honking of cars, the occasional rush of footsteps, the soft murmur of late-night conversations. But Clara sat alone in her tiny apartment, surrounded by the silence of her own thoughts. Her apartment wasn't much. It was a small space with peeling walls and old furniture that seemed to sag under the years. The soft glow from a single light bulb above illuminated the room in a dull, almost haunting way. There were stacks of unopened bills scattered across the table, and a mug of cold, forgotten coffee by her side. Everything in her life seemed to be slipping away little by little. Clara wasn't always like this. She used to be full of hope, dreaming of a future that was bright and full of possibilities. But now, after so many setbacks, the weight of life had worn her down. The money was always tight. Her relationship was hanging by a thread, and her job, which she had once found some meaning in, felt like it was slowly draining her soul. She hadn't always felt this way. Not when she was younger, when her eyes sparkled with excitement for what lay ahead. Back then, Clara had been the type of person who believed that no matter how tough things got, they would eventually get better. But that was before the bills piled up, before she found herself walking the tightrope of living paycheck to paycheck, before she found herself trapped in a job she hated but couldn't afford to leave. It was before she had spent so many nights crying herself to sleep, wondering how much longer she could keep pretending that everything was okay. Clara's hands trembled as she picked up a crumpled piece of paper from the table. It was another bill, another reminder that life was slipping further out of her control. She let out a sigh, the kind of sigh that felt like it carried the weight of years of disappointment. She tried to swallow the lump in her throat, but it felt like it wouldn't go away. The truth was, she didn't know how much longer she could keep going. Her eyes moved to the clock on the wall, which ticked loudly in the otherwise quiet room. It was almost midnight. Clara had been staring at the same bill for what felt like hours. Her brain was exhausted from the constant cycle of worries. How would she pay the rent this month? How could she fix her broken relationship? And what about her job? Was there any hope of climbing out of this rut? She had tried everything she could think of, but nothing ever seemed to get better. It was as if the universe was determined to keep her stuck in this endless loop of frustration and sadness. She felt trapped, not just by her circumstances, but by her own mind. Every time she tried to think of a way out, she came up blank. It was hard to even imagine a future that wasn't filled with stress and uncertainty. Everything seemed dark, and she was exhausted from trying to make it all work. And then there was the man in her life. Once he had been her support, the one she turned to when things got tough. But now their relationship had become strained. What had once been a source of comfort had turned into another source of tension. He was just as worn out by life as she was, and they had drifted further and further apart. They had stopped talking about their dreams, their hopes, and their future together. They had stopped talking, period. Clara could feel the weight of the silence between them, the unspoken distance that seemed to grow with each passing day. She wasn't even sure if he cared anymore. Maybe he was just as stuck as she was, unable to find a way out of his own misery. Or maybe he had already given up on her. Her heart ached at the thought. She didn't want to lose him, but how could they fix things when they couldn't even communicate? She wanted to scream, to shout at the universe and demand answers, but she didn't know where to start. As the minutes ticked by, Clara felt a wave of despair wash over her. She had no answers, no solutions. She was trapped in a life that felt too heavy to carry on her own. And in that moment, she wondered if maybe there was no way out. That was when she heard the knock on the door. It was soft at first, almost hesitant, as if whoever was on the other side wasn't sure if they should be there. Clara looked up, her mind slow to process the sound. She hadn't been expecting anyone. Who could it be at this hour? She pushed herself up from the chair, her legs stiff from sitting too long. As she walked to the door, her heart began to beat a little faster. Maybe it was him, her partner. Maybe he had come to talk, to fix things. She opened the door just enough to peek through the crack. Standing on the other side was a man she barely recognized. His face was familiar. She had seen him around before, a friend of a friend, but she didn't know him well enough to have a real conversation. His eyes were tired, but there was something in them, something that made her pause. "Clara," he said softly, his voice almost too quiet to hear. "Can we talk?" For a moment, Clara stood frozen, unsure of what to say or do. She wasn't sure she wanted to talk to anyone. especially not someone she barely knew. But then something inside her shifted, and she stepped aside, allowing him into the apartment. They sat together in the small, dimly lit room, the silence between them thick. Clara felt as though she was trapped in her own thoughts, not sure how to break the heavy tension. And then, without warning, the words spilled out of her. "I just don't know what to do anymore," Clara whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "I feel like I'm drowning and I can't find a way out. I don't even know if I want to anymore." The man didn't say anything at first. He simply sat there listening, his eyes filled with something that resembled understanding. It was the first time in a long while that Clara felt like someone was truly hearing her. And that was when it happened. Without thinking, without any plan or reasoning, she found herself saying the words she had been holding back for so long. "Please. Just make it quick." She whispered the words more to herself than to him, hoping that somehow in that moment it might bring an end to the weight she was carrying. The room seemed to go still as the seconds stretched on, each one feeling heavier than the last. Clara didn't know what she was expecting, but she certainly didn't expect what came next. Clara's eyes fluttered open slowly, the harsh overhead lights feeling like they were drilling into her skull. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure of where she was or how she had gotten there. Her mind was foggy, and everything around her seemed distant, like she was watching it all from far away. The sound of beeping machines and the soft hum of air conditioning filled the sterile room she was in. The smell of antiseptic was so strong it almost made her gag. Where was she? What had happened? Her body felt different, heavy, as if it didn't quite belong to her anymore. She tried to move her arm, but it was as if it had been tied down by invisible weights. Panic began to creep in. Had something gone wrong? Was she paralyzed? Her thoughts raced, and a sense of dread flooded her chest. She wanted to scream, to call out, but her throat felt dry and her voice refused to cooperate. Her gaze shifted slowly, landing on a figure sitting beside her bed. It was a woman, someone Clara didn't recognize at first. The woman's face was soft, kind, with a hint of sadness in her eyes. The woman smiled gently as Clara's eyes met hers, though it was a smile tinged with worry. "You're awake," the woman said softly, her voice a comfort amidst the confusion. Clara tried to speak but only managed a faint croak. The woman quickly reached for a glass of water on the bedside table, helping Clara sip it slowly. The cool liquid felt like heaven as it slid down her dry throat. The woman stayed quiet, letting Clara regain some of her bearings. "What happened?" Clara managed to ask, her voice shaky. The woman hesitated for a moment before speaking. "You're in the hospital. There was an incident, but you're going to be okay. You just need to rest." Clara's mind began to race again, trying to piece together the puzzle of what had brought her here. She couldn't remember much. Bits and pieces flashed in her mind. Her apartment, the conversation with the man who had knocked on her door, her whispered plea. "Please, just make it quick." But everything after that was a blur. Had something gone wrong? Had the worst happened? The woman noticed the confusion in Clara's eyes and gently reassured her. "Don't worry, Clara, you're safe now. You're alive. That's what matters." Clara's chest tightened and she struggled to find the words. I thought I... The woman placed a hand on Clara's arm, her touch warm and reassuring. "It's okay. You don't have to explain anything right now. Just focus on getting better." But Clara couldn't let go of the feeling that something was wrong. She felt like she was in a different world now, a place where nothing made sense and the future felt like a shadow she couldn't reach. Her eyes wandered to the hospital room around her. It was too bright, too clean. Nothing felt familiar, and everything felt like a stark contrast to the mess of her life outside these walls. She closed her eyes, trying to focus on her breathing. "In and out, calm down. You're okay. You're alive." But the words felt empty, like they didn't belong to her. Clara didn't feel okay. She felt like a stranger in her own body. As the hours passed, Clara started to notice more. She was hooked up to an IV, her arm sore from the needle. There were bandages wrapped around her wrists and a dull ache that lingered in her chest. But it was the emptiness in her heart that bothered her the most. Everything had changed, and she wasn't sure what that meant. Days passed, and Clara was slowly allowed to sit up, then walk around, and eventually, she was moved to a different room where the doctors could observe her. Her physical wounds, while painful, were not the worst part of her recovery. It was the mental and emotional toll that was harder to bear. She was alive, yes, but she felt like a ghost. Her thoughts were jumbled, her mind trapped between the memory of what she had done and the reality of being here, still breathing, still existing. She didn't know what to make of it. Was this a second chance, or was it just a cruel reminder that she wasn't in control of her own fate? Her days in the hospital were filled with visits from doctors, nurses, and even a few family members who tried to reassure her. But Clara felt distant, like she was watching everything happen from behind a glass wall. There were moments when she wondered if she would ever feel whole again, or if she would forever be caught in the aftermath of that one fateful night. It was during one of her quiet moments, as she stared out the window of her hospital room at the gray sky, that she heard a knock on the door. Clara didn't have to look to know who it was. She could feel his presence even before he spoke. "Clara?" His voice was soft, and when she turned to face him, her heart skipped a beat. It was him, the man from her apartment. He stood in the doorway looking tired but hopeful, as if this was the first time in a long while that he felt like he had something to offer. She didn't say anything at first. How could she? After everything that had happened, what could she possibly say? Her heart was tangled in a mess of emotions, relief, regret, confusion, and fear. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I never meant for this to happen. I never meant for you to feel this way." Clara didn't know what to say. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, to understand how things had gone so wrong. But all she could do was stare at him. "You didn't do this to me," Clara finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "I did this to myself. I asked for it." The words felt like a weight in her chest, but they were the truth. She had asked for it. She had made that choice in a moment of desperation, thinking it would be the end of her pain, but it wasn't the end. Instead, it had opened a door she didn't know how to walk through. His eyes softened, and he took a tentative step toward her, as if afraid that any wrong move might send her running away from him. "I don't know how to help you, Clara, but I want to try. I want to make things right, even if it takes forever." Clara looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but in that moment she realized something. She wasn't alone. She didn't have to carry all of this by herself. Maybe it wasn't too late to start again. Maybe, just maybe, she could rebuild her life piece by piece. The room was silent for a long while as they both stood there, unsure of what to say next. But for the first time in days, Clara felt like there might be a chance for her to move forward. It wouldn't be easy. There would be hard days and the road would be long. But she wasn't as afraid as she had been before. Maybe, just maybe, she could find her way back to hope. And in that moment, Clara realized something else. The 5 seconds that had felt like they would destroy her had in fact changed her forever. But they hadn't taken everything. They had taken something from her, yes, but they had also given her something in return. A chance, a second chance.